Okay. Oh boy. Anyway. Hi everybody. I am back again. I don't know. It's always a little iffy with with YouTube. Um yeah. So thank you for stopping by. I am currently reading my dad's manuscripts as I do a live editing of them. Basically what that means is I'll be every once in a while I'll go silent and I'll be just marking things up. So there'll be a lot of. Also, another thing you need to know is that as I'm reading this is my first time reading it. I've never read it before. I have no idea what it says beforehand. So there's that as well. It's all very special. um, yeah. So these particular chapters aren't very long, although I think this one might actually be one of the longer ones. Let's see here. Yeah, yeah, this one's a longer one, but not that long. Trust me, you got yourself maybe at the very, very most an hour long session here. Unless I have a lot to say about the chapter, in which case I will be talking about the chapter after the fact and we'll go from there. If you hear thumps in the background, that is one of the cats who does not like to, not a fan of streaming right now. There may also be a cat fight going on off the camera. I'm currently live, so I can't really stop that. So if you hear meowing and hissing in the background, like that, it's not me. Sorry. This is the beauty of live. Hopefully World War II does not break out in the background. Otherwise I may have to stop for a moment. Not even stop for a moment, just go off camera and you may hear yelling. Not yelling, just strong, firm, yet loving and understanding language. Or general will drop, food will drop and they'll all be all off. Anyway, now that crisis has been averted, it's now time for me to read chapter 4 of the Saga of Haram. It's a fantasy novel written by my dad back in 1989 with 1989 sensibilities. So we'll see how that works. Okay. Oritz sat quietly for some time, then slowly looked around. "Innkeeper!" he shouted. The innkeeper, a pale and pudgy man, hurried over. "We will have ale, man, and much of it. Hurry!" Asteran spoke. "Not so quickly, Oritz. You heard what they said. I, for one, do not want any trouble." "Trouble? Who's making trouble?" "Not I. I merely want something to drink." "So do you, and so do all of us. But I promise you, Oritz, at the first sign of drunkenness, I leave and you will be left to your own devices. I will not be pulling you out of danger any longer." The two of them sat staring at each other for a while. Then Oritz looked over at Sagahan. The mage nodded. "She is correct, you know. When you drink too much, there is always trouble. And if we continue to help you out of trouble, there will soon be no town in all of Eridar that will welcome us." Oritz continued to frown, then looked up at the innkeeper. "So, go fetch us a mug of ale, then. And have no fear, I shall be on my best behavior." Oritz was as good as his word all night, though toward the end of the evening he was showing some signs of the strain. Haram noticed this and was careful to avoid antagonizing the warrior. When they left Har the next morning, many of the townspeople were still watching with distrustful eyes. Asteran walked beside Haram for a little ways. "A lesson to you, boy. Offend too many people in too many towns, and no matter how successful adventurer you may be, you will have nowhere to sell your loot." She spoke quietly, and Haram was much aware of Oritz just walking ahead of them. Could only not. She spoke quietly, and Haram, very much aware of Orts walking just ahead of them, could only nod his head. The days went on, stretching into weeks, and the boys continued to train with the sticks under the critical eye of Orist. He also began training them in the use of the sling. It is a simple weapon, a piece of leather and two cords, but it is effective. And it has an advantage over the bow that you are never out of ammunition, as long as there are pebbles in reach. Sorry, that's a formatting issue. Okay. And it has an advantage over the bow in that you are never out of ammunition, so long as there are pebbles in reach. I know that some mold their bullets out of lead, and these having more range and accuracy than stones, but stones will do for now. They practiced with their slings as they went along, and the time came when they could hit a man-sized mark more often than not at 100 paces. Orist, of course, was not satisfied with that and demanded continued practice. Several times they found bands of goblins which they felt safe in attacking, and several times they found bands of 20 or more which they decided to leave alone. Eventually, they had gathered a treasure of some 93 silver coins of various sorts and over 200 copper coins of also various sorts. All this including the money gotten by selling goblin swords and the like. By this time, they'd come to the town of Vascapadan. As usual, people watched them approaching. A man, clearly one of the chief men of the village, stepped out to greet them. "A good day to you, sirs and lady. You are adventurers, then?" "We are," answered Orist. "Is there something we can do for you?" "There's an ogre moved into the hills hereabout, and he's playing hob with the crops and the flocks. Can you rid us of him?" "Be like we could, but you must know that we have to eat as well. What would you pay us?" "Surely your reward would be in the ogre's treasure, would it not?" "Ah, but ogre treasures usually consist of broken sword blades, bits of bright glass, and the like. We must have more than that." They set to bargaining then, and eventually struck what seemed a reasonable agreement. If the treasure in the ogre's lair did not amount to at least 20 silver pieces, the village would make up the difference. As they marched away from the village toward the ogre's lair, Orist called the two boys to him. "I hope that you understood the lesson there. We would likely have sought out the ogre in any case, but if the village is willing to pay us for it, we accept their pay. Thus we make some profit, no matter whether the ogre has treasure or not. Thus do adventurers survive." Haram said nothing. Some time ago he had come to understand there was more to the life of an adventurer than wandering the land seeking goblins or other beasts to slay. On occasion he still dreamed of riding the land as a paladin on a magnificent horse, but he had never told anyone of those dreams, knowing it would only open him to ridicule. Merritt nodded seriously. He had become a little more closed-mouthed in the last months, having hinted once or twice at his own personal desire for growing glory and wealth, only to find himself mocked by the others. He kept his own counsel now, and even Haram did not know a great deal about what he felt or thought. The ogre was laired in the highlands outside the town. As the band marched forward, Asteran went on ahead to scout out the situation. As they were setting up camp in the evening, she came back to make her report. "He's up there for certain. When the wind blows right, you can smell the smell of an ogre's den. There are tracks there as well. From the tracks, I can say he is 4 arms length or more tall and not in good health. He drags his feet sometimes, as though he were weary. He is sick, then? Asked Oryx. Will that sickness help us at all? She shrugged. It will help us in that he will be unable to put forth his full strength in the fight. On the other hand, an ogre of that size may well have the strength to spare for all of us. Have you any suggestions as to how to fight him? One way would be to wait for him along the way to his lair and ambush him. But ambush or no, it's going it's going to come down to sword work before he defeat this one. So we sit beside the trail for him and wait. We sit beside the trail for him for a few hours or a few days? Or shrugged. Best we get down to it then. Merritt spoke up then. Why don't we go to the ogre's lair while he's away and take what treasure there might be and be on our way? There was silence. Finally, Oryx looked at him. I suppose we do that. Even supposing there is treasure in the ogre's lair worth more than what the villagers will pay. What then? If we come around through here next year or the year after, what sort of welcome will we get? Don't be a fool, boy. When you make arrangements, honor them, else they may come back to haunt you. Merritt flushed but remained silent. Asteron, Asteron found them a place to lay their ambush. As far as Haram could tell, it was no better than any other place. But he knew better than to argue with her or any of the others. He was no longer so terribly in awe of them as when they had left Ifan Sor. But he still respected the fact that they knew much more about this business than he did. Before they took their places, Oryx spoke to the two. This fight will not be like the other fights we've had, and this time we'll be needing you to take a full part. At least you'll be needing to use your slings. Nay, you would not be able to kill an ogre with 2 slug stones, nor even 4. But even a hit with a stone will hurt him, and weakening him for some time when we have to fight hand to hand. And when we're fighting hand to hand, if you see a clear chance, use your slings. He'll have too much reach for you to risk your daggers or your sticks. But even a stone or two in the midst of the fight may at least distract him for long enough for one of us to make good use of our swords. Have you any questions? They had none. They had been sitting quietly since some time before sundown, and there had been no sign of the monster. Harams shifted slightly in his hiding place to ease a cramped leg. He wondered what good they could do now, since the light was so poor. He was unsure of his ability to hit the tree across the trail, let alone a moving creature. It was not for him, a junior member, to make suggestions or complaints. Oris would undoubtedly call them out of their places in a few moments, and they would go back to their camp. There was movement out on the trail. His first thought was that Oryx was coming out, as he had expected, to call them from their hiding places. His next impression is that it was too large to be Oryx. Then suddenly he knew what it was. It was huge, seeming twice as tall as himself, and broad as well. It had features similar to those of a goblin, though there seemed less intelligence in that glance, in the glance it cast at its surroundings. It had a hairy pelt of some sort wrapped around its loins, and a large club, little more than a tree limb broken off and rubbed smooth, clutched in its right hand. Haram looked to the stone in his sling, a stone about the size of his fist, and wondered how much good a missile such as that would do against this monster. Or it's give the signal, a shrill whistle, and in the same moment, bowstrings hummed, and arrows flew. A bare instant later, a bolt of some kind streaked out from Sagahan's position, blinding Haram for a moment. Haram leapt to his feet. The sling not is not weapon easily is not a weapon easily wielded on one's knees behind a bush. Give me a minute. Oh boy. There you go. Haram leapt to his feet, for the sling is not a weapon easily wielded on one's knees behind a bush. His vision was returning, and he could see the ogre staring around, looking for whoever it was that had wounded it. As he whirled his sling, Haram suddenly realized that he would be the target for the monster's rage. And so it proved. He released the stone at the same moment the ogre saw him, and the ogre gave a roar of anger and lunged toward him. In the same instant, two more arrows struck it in the chest, and some sort of glowing dart flew out to hit home in the same place. Sagahan had realized that though his bolts of lightning were effective, they also blinded friend and foe, and no one could afford to lose their vision, not even for a moment. Whoops. Haram jumped backward, moving around a tree as the ogre surged forward, covering ground at a terrifying rate. There were two more arrows in the ogre's chest, then another two of the glowing darts, but the beast was concentrating on Haram. As it rushed toward him, Oryx sprang out and swung his sword, a vicious chopping blow into its side. It bellowed and turned to face the fresh attack, forcing Oryx to skip backward as it swung its club toward him. Asteran came in behind the ogre and struck with her lighter sword. Even wounded as it was, the ogre was quick. It swung a backhand blow towards with its club, which Asteran barely dodged, then brought the club around to where Oryx was moving in from the front. Haram suddenly recalled Oryx's instructions and put another stone in his sling, whirled it around his head and let it go. With the dim moonlight and the noise of the battle, he could not tell whether he had hit it or not. He took up another stone. The small, bright darts were flying out of the bush where Sagahan hid. The mage carried a light sword, but he was no expert in its use. And in a fight such as this, he would do best to employ his magic instead. Haram threw stone after stone at the monster, and sometimes even saw them hit, once drawing blood from the ogre's upper chest. For all that, though, he felt that he might as well have been tossing flowers. Even Sagahan's darts seemed not to have any effect. Astran and Oris leaped in and out, striking, thrusting, slashing, and by their agility avoiding the monster's return attacks. Even as he cast stones, Haram realized the armor would give little protection in such a fight. A blow from the ogre's club would break bones, no matter how they were protected. The ogre's club swept backward toward Asteran. Though it barely seemed to brush her as she dodged, she went spinning backward and to fall limply to the ground. Haram cried out, jumped forward, throwing another stone. The stroke that felled Asteran had been a grazing blow, but the ogre felt it and turned full around. With a roar of triumph, he raised his club in both hands and stepped forward to smash the life out of his fallen foe. That's the end of the chapter. Happy Friday! So, yeah, that's it for now. Sorry to leave you off on a cliffhanger there. Um, but I'll talk to everybody on Monday. Again, I'll be somewhere between 5 and 7. Just keep an ear out for me. Um, Around that time frame, I'll be here, and I'll be with pen and markers bound to do more editing and more reading. And we will find out more. Like I know some stuff that happens later on because I read the synopsis, so I know things that happen. So in this case, I don't really know what happens next, and I don't know will will Asteran will she survive this fight or not? We will find out on Monday. So have a good weekend, everybody, and thank you all for tuning in. I really, really appreciate it. If you have any questions or you want to post any comments, just feel free. I think you can still do that in YouTube. Sorry, Twitch. I'm not sure. Like I want to say that you can like chat after the fact. I'm not sure that works on Twitch. I'm pretty sure at least on YouTube you can definitely leave comments online. I want to say that. I want to say that. I could be lying though. I could be completely lying, and I hope not. Anyway, I will talk to you all again really soon. See you Monday.